We hear a lot about content in Call of Duty, more now than ever. What game actually had the most content? Does the new game have enough content? Well, we are going to do an experiment today on the page. Welcome, everybody. We are going to go through COD history from COD 4 all the way to Black Ops Cold War, and we are going to analyze just how much content each game launched with and how much it actually ended up with once it was all said and done. Yep. We're going to be calling out some Call of Duty titles. We're going to definitively prove which COD games had the most content, as well as take an interesting look at how much this aspect of COD has changed over the years. You guys let me know in the comments, what do you think is an acceptable amount of content for a Call of Duty through its 1-year life cycle? Drop a like, make sure you have those notifications turned on, and let's start the journey. COD 4, the beginning, kind of. Well, we're going to call it the beginning. It dropped in 2007. It was a huge turning point for the series. Now, in terms of content, Infinity Ward really went all out. They did, which is impressive considering this was a completely new type of game. They had no idea how COD 4 would perform or if people would be interested in all the changes they were making to the formula, but they jam-packed it full of content anyway. First, there was the campaign, which was about 5 to 7 hours long on your first playthrough. Then, there was a very underrated arcade mode, which was unlocked by completing the campaign on hardened difficulty, and it would actually let you play through the campaign again, but with a bunch of fun scoring mechanics and multipliers. It's pretty cool. It allowed you to face off with your buddies and try to beat each other's high scores. It was basically like an early version of Modern Warfare 2 Spec Ops. Then, there was the revolutionary multiplayer mode. COD 4 launched with an impressive 16 maps and 26 guns, which is nearly unheard of today. Maybe a little low on the gun count, but 16 launch maps? I mean, come on. Now, there was no third mode because this was 2007 and the COD formula hadn't really been solidified yet, but COD 4 had a ton of content, and that was before the Variety Map Pack added another 4 multiplayer maps to the mix. This was a good start. Speaking of good starts, before we head on to World at War, guys, if you get any type of gaming PC or if you're in the market for building your own custom gaming PC or laptop, check out the Apex Gaming PC line. Also, check out the Chaos DEFCON line, and if you want to build one, we've got budget friendly all the way up to the high tier. Use code CHAOS, link is at the top of the description. World at War. It came exactly 1 year after COD 4, and it borrowed most of its skeleton from Infinity Ward. That being said, World at War actually had a significant increase in content thanks to the addition of a proper third mode. You guessed it, zombies. Like COD 4, World at War featured a single-player campaign. It would take you about 5 to 7 hours to finish your first time around, just like COD 4. Arcade mode was cut from World at War, but instead, we got zombies. Super simple at the time, and it only launched with one map, but that one map was a fan favorite, Nocturne Toten, which it was pretty massive high point to start out on. Plus, as time went on, 3 more zombies maps were added via DLC. Then we had the multiplayer. World at War featured just 13 maps at launch. That's not bad, but it's not great, but they had 30 guns. So there were a few less maps, but more guns to make up for it. It balanced out, and eventually Treyarch released Making Day as the free 14th multiplayer map. Now, ultimately, World at War had a solid amount of content for a COD game, and then another 9 multiplayer maps were added as DLC in case you wanted any more. So far, we're riding high. Now we arrive at Modern Warfare 2. If you didn't know, it had some extremely troubled development. The post-launch support was not the best due to the falling out between Infinity Ward and Activision. However, on the content side, it was pretty good on launch day. Modern Warfare 2 launched with a single-player campaign, but this time around, Infinity Ward replaced arcade mode with the fan-favorite Spec Ops. This expanded upon arcade mode's formula and let you go through sections of a campaign in co-op with your buddies, as well as other non-campaign missions, and try to beat each other's high scores. You were always shooting for that ever-elusive 3-star rating. Then, we had multiplayer. Modern Warfare 2 launched with 16 maps, 37 guns, and 5 launchers. That's crazy. Huge step up from COD 4 and a new standard for the franchise. Now, when it comes to post-launch support, like I said, the legal feud between Activision and Infinity Ward, it kept them from releasing very much DLC. Once it was all said and done, only 10 paid DLC maps were added to Modern Warfare 2, and 4 of them were remakes from COD 4. So, from a launch content standpoint, Modern Warfare 2 was great. But from a post-launch standpoint, there's not a lot to talk about, although it was it's understandable. I mean, given the circumstances at that time. Now we arrive at one of my favorite Call of Duties of all time. Probably my personal favorite. Black Ops. Black Ops launched in 2010. Now, the launch content was a tad less than Modern Warfare 2, but the DLC went all out for both multiplayer and zombies. First, let's talk about multiplayer. Black Ops 1 launched with 14 multiplayer maps and 36 guns, 4 launchers, 2 special weapons, the ballistic knife, and the crossbow. So, slightly less than Modern Warfare 2, but not by much. When it comes to DLC, though, Black Ops 1 went way harder, largely thanks to the fact that Treyarch wasn't in the middle of a lawsuit. Another 12 multiplayer maps were added as paid DLC, bringing your total map count to 26. Then you have zombies. Black Ops 1 launched with 2 multiplayer maps in Dead Ops Arcade. Then, there were another 4 added via DLC, plus Treyarch eventually ported all 4 of the World at War Zombies maps over to Black Ops 1, which brought the total Zombies maps count to 3 base and 8 DLC, the most in any COD game to date. Even today, 11 Zombies maps, that's a pretty big, hefty offering. Overall, Black Ops 1 had a solid amount of launch content and a ton of great DLC content. Now we arrive at what some consider to be the pinnacle, the peak, the mecca. Modern Warfare 3. I've said this many times. Modern Warfare 3 had the most launch content of any COD player, and you know what? It's still true. Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer launch was 16 maps and quickly added another one as a free DLC, as well as 2 free maps for the Face-Off playlist, bringing the base map count to 19. As for weaponry, Modern Warfare 3 launched with 42 guns, 6 launchers, a riot shield, and gave you a ridiculous 49 weapons to use on launch day. As for DLC, Modern Warfare 3 had 9 content packs that added maps for both multiplayer and face-off. Once it was all said and done and the smoke settled, another 17 multiplayer maps and 5 face-off maps were added, bringing the total to 33 multiplayer and 7 face-off. Modern Warfare 3 also saw the return of Spec Ops, which was mostly unchanged from Modern Warfare 2, but we got a brand new survival mode. It was like a horde-based mode that could be played on every single multiplayer map. Modern Warfare 3 had so much content. I know, it didn't have zombies, but it didn't matter. Every other aspect of the game was jam-packed with content. That trend would continue the following year, albeit to a slightly lesser degree. Overall, Modern Warfare 3 had a ridiculous amount of launch content, and I wish we could go back to those standards. Now we arrive at Black Ops 2. Some say it's the best Call of Duty ever. It was impressive. Impressive lineup of content on day one. You had the single-player campaign, but this time around there were branching storylines that encouraged multiple playthroughs, and so you could see all the various changes. Then, on the multiplayer side, the game launched with 14 maps, 32 guns, 3 launchers, and 3 special weapons. Shortly after launch, Treyarch added Nuketown 2025 as a free DLC, bringing that base map count to 15. This was also the first time we ever got a DLC weapon in the Peacekeeper. It was added a little ways into the game's life cycle as part of the Revolution DLC. And speaking of DLC, Black Ops 2 had some of the best DLC offerings we've ever seen. Another 16 maps were added as paid DLC, almost all of them great. It brought the total map count up to 30 and the total gun count to 33. As for zombies, the game launched with 1 map, but that 1 map was Transit, which was actually made up of 4 smaller maps, so I'm not really sure how to count it. I guess I'll count it as 1 giant map, but then a little ways in, we got Nuketown Zombies as free DLC, so let's just say Black Ops 2 launched with 2 zombies maps. Another 5 maps were added as paid DLC, bringing the zombie map count to 7. Now, Black Ops 2 had slightly less content than its predecessor, but that content was top tier. It's still one of the most beloved games in the entire franchise, and it's not hard to see why. Almost everything about the game was great. Now we arrive at COD Ghosts. As much as people hated on it, it's pretty solid in content, or when it comes to content. It launched with 14 multiplayer maps, 35 guns, 3 launchers. It also added 2 new guns as DLC, which was pretty cool at the time. Infinity Ward also added Freefall as a free DLC, bringing the base map count to 15, although Freefall doesn't really count, but it's a number. Ghosts had some of the best DLC offerings in COD history. 16 multiplayer maps that dramatically sped up the game pace and improved the visibility. Now, where Ghosts fell apart in the content department was the 3rd mode. Instead of zombies, we had Extinction, which was like this sci-fi twist on zombies, but far more linear, way less replayable. I know some people liked it, but most didn't. There was only 1 Extinction map on launch day, and while another 4 were added, I don't think people didn't really care. So in terms of multiplayer, Ghost added a decent amount of content. The DLC was really solid, but outside of that, the game struggled. I thought Extinction was a cool experiment, but ultimately Zombies was the better choice for replay value. Now we arrive at our first jetpack game, Advanced Warfare. This is where things get crazy. After all, COD, this was the first time COD would dabble in supply drops, and for the sake of this video, we're not going to be counting all the weapon variants because there's just too many. Advanced Warfare launched with 13 multiplayer maps and a free bonus map a little after launch, so we'll call it 14, which is a solid map count for 6v6. As for weaponry, 28 guns, 3 launchers on launch day, which is a little on the low side. However, as time went on, another 14 were added as DLC, although the methods for obtaining these guns, they weren't easy. You either had to buy a DLC pack or get lucky with a supply drop, depending on which gun we're talking about. Advanced Warfare also had an additional 16 maps added as paid DLC, although I'm not really sure how many of you actually remember the Advanced Warfare DLC maps. They weren't bad, they just weren't very memorable. Third mode, Exo Survival. Decent enough, pretty similar to Modern Warfare 3's mode of the same name. Then a little after launch, we got the very controversial Exo Zombies, which has a bit of a cult following, but it wasn't really a selling point for the game. Exo Zombies had no base maps, instead it was one map included with each of the 4 DLC packs. So in total, there were 4 Exo Zombies maps, but you had to pay for all of them, which was kind of lame. I think if Exo Zombies had been included in the base game, probably would have been a little more popular, but since it was tied to DLC, not everybody experienced it. Like I said earlier, Advanced Warfare got a lot of mileage out of the supply drops and the weapon variants, but as for the base content that we're looking at in this video, it was kind of middle of the road. Now we arrive at Black Ops 3. I bet some of you were waiting for me to talk about this game. So much content, but a giant chunk of it was locked behind supply drops, so it's kind of hard to talk about. On launch day, Black Ops 3 had a single-player campaign, the new Nightmare mode for the campaign, a new free-run mode, a Zombies mode with 1 map, and Dead Ops Arcade 2, and a multiplayer with 12 maps, 28 guns, 2 launchers. Now, it didn't have a whole lot of multiplayer content, but it had a ton of content everywhere else. Heck, we got 2 brand new modes in the form of Nightmare and Free Run, although neither one of them really expanded upon the DLC. But speaking of DLC, Black Ops 3 was jam-packed with it. For starters, there was 3 free DLC maps, so I'll bring the base map count up to 15. But as for paid DLC, there's another 16, 20 if you want to count the Back in Black DLC. So on the zombie side, 1 free DLC map, 4 paid, and then another 8 with the Zombies Chronicle expansion, but you guys want to probably hear about the supply drop fiasco. Once it was all said and done, Black Ops 3 added another 26 guns, 2 launchers, 3 special weapons, and 20 melee weapons, all of which were locked behind supply drops with less than a 1% chance of pulling them. Black Ops 3 had more supply drop weapons than base weapons, which is... It is what it is. I'm really glad the supply drop trend is over because that was a really bad time for the COD's business model, which sucked because I love Black Ops 3 as a game. But when you break down how much content you got with the base game versus how much content was behind supply drops, it was rough. Now we get to Infinite Warfare. It did its best to correct the mistakes of Black Ops 3's business model, and ultimately, it did okay. It launched with a very good campaign, a pretty fun Zombies mode with 1 map, and a rather controversial multiplayer mode. You had 12 maps, 31 guns, 3 launchers. Okay, it's definitely on the lower side for an Infinity War game, but they quickly added another 2 free multiplayer maps to bring that map count to 14. Throughout the year, you got another 13 guns and 1 launcher. They were added for free, which is cool, which brought the weapon count up to 44 guns and 4 launchers. That's a pretty solid sweet spot. Zombies didn't get a lot of love. 1 launch map and then 4 paid DLC maps. Then there was also 16 multiplayer DLC maps that you had to pay for, but honestly, I don't remember them. I don't think many people were playing the game's DLC, honestly. Infinite Warfare definitely made its post-launch content easier to get than Black Ops 3, but with that being said, it wasn't anything great. One hand, the business model was a huge step in the right direction, but the content left something to be desired. Now we arrive at COD World War II. This is where COD's launch content problem started. Everybody remembers COD World War II launching with a super small amount of content, and there are tons of theories as to why. The most popular is the one where World War II actually started development as Advanced Warfare, but it had to be rebooted halfway through, forcing Sledgehammer to cut a lot of corners in order to get the game done. So how much content did it launch? Starters. We had 9 multiplayer maps on day 1, not including the pre-order bonus. Yes, we had 3 maps exclusive to the War mode, but if we're talking about 6v6, COD World War II launched with 9 maps in the base game, which that was a new series low. Okay, guns. Well, they launched with 28 guns and 2 launchers, which is pretty low for a new COD game. Now, it is worth noting that a whopping 45 guns were added post-launch, and to my knowledge, they're all obtainable by free by doing challenges and credits. That means, if you picked up COD World War II today, you would have an impressive 73 guns at your disposal, which is insane. Sledgehammer also added another 5 free maps for 6v6, bringing that total to 14, which is still on the low side when it comes to base content. But then, there was another 12 released as paid DLC, but the launch content situation was odd. It's also worth noting that while there was only 1 launch Zombies map in COD World War II, another 2 were added as free DLC, so I'm going to bring the base content count up to 3 Zombies maps. Now, COD World War II had an absurd amount of post-launch content for a COD game, although a lot of the fans weren't super stoked about the game. One hand, the game had over 70 guns once it was all said and done, but still 14 multiplayer maps. And none of these should excuse the extremely poor launch day selection. I don't know what you guys think, but it launched with a massive content drought. Black Ops 4. Now, the content situation, it gets a little worse. Now, the game launched with 14 maps, but you have to remember, 4 of them were remakes and 10 were original. Plus, Black Ops 4 also launched with 25 guns and 1 rocket launcher. That's a low point again. Now, plus. Black Ops 4 ditched the single-player campaign altogether in favor of a Blackout Battle Royale mode, but then they kind of made up for it with 3 Zombies maps, which was the most we've ever gotten at launch in a COD game. Like I said, the content was odd. It's easy to look at the amount of content Black Ops 4 cut from previous games and say, oh, Black Ops 4 had no content, but you have to remember all the extra stuff they threw in, like a Battle Royale mode and extra Zombies maps. Post-launch, Treyarch added a few more multiplayer maps and a handful of free guns, but the rest of Black Ops 4's post-launch content was either locked behind the Black Ops Pass or the supply drop system. Overall, Black Ops 4 wasn't exactly a content-rich game, and if you were to pick the game up today, you'd have to spend quite a bit of money. Now we've arrived at Modern Warfare 2019. It's a strange game to talk about because in the grand scheme of things, it didn't launch with much more content, but it added an insane amount of content post-launch, and it was free. On launch day, we had the single-player campaign, the disastrous Spec Ops mode, which was buggy broken and barely had any content, and the multiplayer, which is extremely divisive and didn't have a lot. So let's start off with Spec Ops. Bugs aside, it didn't have any content. Come on. It was bad. Players were pretty upset about this, and it was nothing like the classic. Then, on the multiplayer side of things, Modern Warfare launched with 10 maps, but out of those 10, only 2 to 3 were actually built for 6v6. The rest were designed for 10v10, or they were meant to be played in both 6v6 and 10v10. This meant if you were a core 6v6 player, you barely had any maps at launch day. There was also 3 maps for ground war and 7 maps for gunfight, which that was a nice change of pace, but it didn't really fix the 6v6 content issue. The game also launched with 33 guns and 4 launchers. Okay. Post-launch, that's where it got crazy. As of this video's recording, a whopping 18 multiplayer maps have been added for free, as well as 6 more ground war maps and 11 gunfight maps, more than doubling the launch variety. There's also been another 19 guns added to the mix, all of which are free and unlockable by completing challenges. So, if you were to pick up Modern Warfare now, you have 28 multiplayer maps, 9 ground war maps, 18 gunfight maps, and 51 guns. Now, when it comes to base content, I think that's pretty good. It's a shame it took over a year. And now we end at Black Ops Cold War. Heavily criticized for the content drought. Granted, some of that can be excused because, well, it's in the heart of a pandemic. But if the game wasn't ready for launch, some argue they shouldn't have launched it. We have to critique everything fairly, and Black Ops Cold War certainly didn't have a lot of content on launch day, but that got rapidly fixed. Free updates, same way Modern Warfare's content was fixed. It launched with a single-player campaign, a multiplayer mode, zombies mode, none of which had much content. The campaign was fun, but it was short, although it should be noted that the featured branching storylines helped you play more. Multiplayer launched with 25 guns, 2 launchers, 8 maps, which that's unacceptable for a COD game in 2020. Again, I know it was largely developed during a pandemic, so we'll take that into effect. The zombie side of things was barren. 1 map and Dead Ops Arcade 3, which was disappointing after Black Ops 4 launched with 3 zombie maps. But after all that, I want to reiterate, Treyarch is rapidly fixing the content problem. As of this video's recording, another 10 guns have been added for free, as well as 9 more multiplayer maps, and I think it's a little early to judge Black Ops Cold War from a content perspective, but it is on the decent track right now. Only time will tell if Treyarch keeps that train on the tracks, and there you have it, my friends. That is every single Call of Duty and what they actually launched with. So you tell me, what do you think was the best? What do you think was the worst? I have to go with Modern Warfare 3. I really do. But then if you look at Modern Warfare 2019 and how it was after, I mean, I don't know. It's definitely something to debate. So you guys let me know. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.